if you're working part-time under SGA, and the only reason you're under SGA is because there's no way you could be above SGA. There's no way that you could work more. You've tried to work more.
Yeah.
Like you said, bodily, maybe you work and then the next day you can barely get out of bed because your back hurts so much.
Sure.
Where I talk to a lot of mental health clients to where if they were working full time, they would just, they would have a panic attack or
Sure.
something like that.
Yeah.
That's a valid reason. And it helps us when we see that, yeah, they're working part time, they're working under SGA, and they've been working part-time under SGA, that same schedule, for a couple years.
Right.
And they've tried to work full-time, and they just can't do it.
And that is indicative of disability. I have a hearing coming up next month at the judge's office, and I love it when the judge's office, they're proving to me, they tell me that they're reviewing the file way in advance of the hearing, and it's kind of dubious to me, especially talking to some of them who, did you read my brief? What brief? Well,
Yeah.
But anyway, this judge, she actually, she asked her one of the senior attorneys to call my office. Mr. So-and-so's conditions, I believe, are disabling. However, he's got some earnings in such and such quarter, and they're not above SGA. They're way below. But she's got to deal with the earnings because that's her job. And called him up, and he said the exact same thing. Basically, yeah, I work 2 days a week, and it's rare for me to work back-to-back days because if I work on Monday and then I work again on Tuesday, I'm down for the rest of the week. So usually I work on Monday, and then I kind of take a day to try to, get all the kinks out. And then Wednesday I'll do it, but then I'm done until the weekend. And so, yeah, I'm working 2 days a week. Have you tried to work, more? Yeah. I did this job, and that's the one that's showing up. And I did it for a week, solid, 5 days in a row, and it literally sent me to the hospital.
Yeah.
And I said, I remember seeing that hospital record. Yeah, they had to give you morphine. You were in such pain. Yeah, that's the one. That's indicative of disability. And the SGA, but it wasn't SGA, but the earnings that they had didn't disqualify them. I get to tell the judge, good catch, and this is what this was. Mm-hmm. And we're pretty sure, even though the hearing's scheduled, we're pretty sure that she's just going to allow the case. It's OTR, which means on the record. She's not going to bother making him come in or appear by phone to testify. She sees that the medical records do show that he's disabled.
Yeah. In this entire process, the two most common things that, well, in my opinion, you might agree or disagree, but the two most common things that I hear all the time or complaints rather, is if I'm disabled, why do I have to go through this whole process? Why do I have to prove I'm disabled? And then the second thing is the earnings bit, which is, well, what am I supposed to do? It takes, right now 6 to 8 months for an initial decision. If I'm denied another 6 to 8 months, how am I going to survive? I got to do something here.
Right.
And those are the main two things I hear, and there's really not a good answer.
Right. It's, that's been a problem, well before. I started with disability when, the internet was in its infancy. And I started my practice when still a lot of people weren't using the internet. But now that they are, and you see ads all the time on all of the social platforms, have you been told that you can't work and draw a disability? Well, that's not true. You can.
It's just so misleading.
Yes, and so we have to fight that. It's like, yeah, that ad was actually true, but what the ad's trying to get you to do, which is, of course, click or call that firm. If you go down that road and you're working, when you get to us, no, I can't help you. And it's like in a hearing, and this happens quite a bit. And it is the worst possible thing that you can say. And you've probably already said it to me in our prep, and I warn you, if you say that in front of a judge, you better have a good explanation. And the words that we hear are, well, those earnings are because I had to do something.
Yep.
I had to do something. And so the judge's question is almost always going to be, all right, let's say that I deny your case. Do you have to do something? Are you going to go back to work? And that's a really, really scary question for a disability claimant in a hearing, because what are you going to say? You just told him that you had to do something, and that's why these over SGA earnings have showed up in your file. You know, I worked for 5 months because, you know, I had to pay my car insurance, or, you know, I had to feed my kids. These are all super, absolutely everybody on planet Earth, except really, really rich folks, they deal with these things. They have to work because they have to pay their bills. They have to pay their rent. They have to pay their mortgage. They have to pay a car note. They have to buy food. You have to, you know, feed and clothe their children. These are all things, and they're absolutely valid. But as harsh as it is for us to say on this end, disability benefits are for those who can't do that. I had to do something, but I couldn't. Oh, okay. Well, that's what a disabled person would say.
Yeah.
You know, well, what happened? Well, you know, I had to borrow money from from my mom, or the church had to give us money, you know, to buy groceries that month. That sucks. But that's what a disabled person would say. You know,
Yeah.
Not that, well, I went to work because I had to do something. Well, disabled people, they're just like that. They have to do something, but they can't.
Yeah.
Or they try and they fail, which is, of course, indicative of disability. So just, you know, as harsh as it is, if you are one of those persons who just tough it out, you know, toughen it out, well, welcome to, you know, tens of millions of other people who are toughing it out. Mm-hmm. You're not disabled under Social Security's law. You know, disability is for people who they try, but they can't tough it out. They just can't make it. Their physical conditions and or their mental health just will not allow them to make it through an 8-hour workday, much less a 40-hour work week. And again, that's hard to say to people. Like you said, you know, it's like, you know, this program is not for somebody who I had to do something and therefore, you know, I went to work. Okay. Well, wait a minute, but you're applying for disability. Yeah. You know, I want to get my benefits. Could you do something now? Well, if I pushed myself, you know, I'd be in pain. A lot of people are in pain and they're working. Mm-hmm. Well, I push myself, and you know, I get home and I'm so mentally fried that you know, I pass out on the couch at 5:00 in the afternoon every day. A lot of people, millions, I would say, people that are like that. They grind it through a work day. They get home and they just collapse on a couch, and they get up the next morning and they do it again. Hard, grueling, grinding, but you're not disabled under the law.
Yeah.
And disability is for people who could not do that. They would try, but they would fail.
Yeah, and it's like I've said before, what I tell clients, there's a lot of different disability programs, but with Social Security disability, it's not a program for if you're in pain while working. It's not a program to make accommodations while you're working. It is if you were unable to work substantial, work full-time or over that amount. If you're unable to do that due to your health, that's when you qualify.
That's right.
And so, yeah, it's funny how consistent that phrase is, I had to do something.
I had to do something.
Yeah, because we get it. I mean, we know what they're saying, and it probably makes you mad when that's the first time you've heard them say that, and you've had their case for 2 years.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make me mad when it's the first time I've spoken to someone and they're like, yeah, I'm going to have, you know, maybe they haven't even gone back to work yet.
Right.
They're out of work for 2 months, and I ask them if they think they're going to be able to return, and they say, well, yeah, I'm going to have to do something. It's like, well, that's tricky.
And how many calls do you get? I know I see them when they come through on websites, email. You know, I'm getting to my wit's end here. I know I'm going to have to quit soon. It's like, I don't really even want to talk to you if you're still working. You know, it's like, you're going to have to quit soon. Yeah, so you're planning on quitting. You know, if you're planning on quitting because of your health, call us when you actually do quit, and make sure that when you do quit, that there's some documentation that you had to quit. due to your health.
Yep.
Not just that, oh, I had enough. A lot of people have had enough. And a lot of people have had enough and stopped working, and they're just getting by. But that's not necessarily disability either. Disability is if they tried, if they just absolutely had to go back to work, they're going to get kicked out. They weren't going to have any kind of groceries. There was no social safety net for them, no food stamps, no anything. Could they go back to work? No, they would fail at it. That's a disabled person.
Yeah.
It is, and that's sad, but that is the way it is. And I'll give you the clinical definition. Having an impairment or a combination of impairments for 12 consecutive months that keep you from doing any type of work on a substantial basis, or having a condition that is expected to result in death. That's Social Security's definition. It's been their definition since they started the disability program. And, if you're able to skirt that definition, you're not disabled.
If you have a question about your disability case, give us a call at 615-453-9151 Monday through Friday, or click the link in the description of this video.